They laughed when she entered the ballroom. Not because she had done anything wrong. They laughed because she was nobody. No wealthy family name, no dazzling beauty, no expensive jewels, no influential relatives waiting to whisper her name into the ears of powerful men. She was simply the girl everyone forgot was standing in the room. And that night, forgetting her would become the greatest mistake they had ever made. The grand ballroom of Blackwood Manor glittered beneath hundreds of candles. Diamonds flashed at elegant throats. Silk gowns swept across polished marble. Gentlemen gathered in expensive black coats, speaking softly about inheritances, estates, and marriages. And near the servants' entrance stood Eleanor Vale. Her dress was old, her gloves had been mended twice, and the only piece of jewelry she wore was a tiny silver locket that had belonged to her mother. She kept her eyes lowered as three young ladies passed her. Is that really what she came wearing? A quiet laugh followed. Perhaps she couldn't afford anything better. She shouldn't have come at all. Eleanor heard every word. She simply tightened her fingers around the silver locket and said nothing. She had learned long ago that when people believed you were insignificant, silence was safer than defending yourself. But then the ballroom doors opened. The music stopped. Every conversation died. The Duke had arrived, Lord Adrian Blackwood, the most feared and respected unmarried nobleman in England, a man whose name could silence a room, a man who had rejected more beautiful women than most men had ever been introduced to. He entered without smiling, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. His expression was cold enough to make even confident gentlemen step aside. Whispers followed him. The Duke. Why is he here? Do you think he'll choose a bride tonight? Eleanor didn't look up. She had no reason to. Men like Adrian Blackwood did not notice women like her, or at least that was what she believed. Because as the Duke crossed the ballroom, he suddenly stopped. His eyes had found her, the girl standing alone beside the servants' corridor, the girl everyone else had decided was a nobody. For several seconds, Adrian simply watched her. He noticed the worn gloves, the modest dress, the way she stood completely still while everyone around her fought desperately to be noticed. Then something in his expression changed. He walked toward her, one step, then another. The laughter around Eleanor slowly disappeared. Someone whispered, "He's going to her." Another voice answered, "Impossible." Eleanor finally raised her eyes. The Duke stopped directly in front of her. He extended his hand. The entire ballroom held its breath. And then, in a voice that carried across the silent room, he said, "Come with me, Eleanor." She stared at his hand. "Your Grace, I don't understand." His eyes never left hers. "You don't need to." He took her trembling hand in his. Then he turned toward the hundreds of people who had laughed at her only moments before, and the Duke of Blackwood said the words that would change Eleanor's life forever. "She is my wife." But why would the most powerful duke in England choose the woman everyone else considered worthless? And what did he know about Eleanor that she herself had never realized? Because Adrian Blackwood had not chosen her out of pity. He had been watching her long before tonight. The ballroom did not become quiet because Eleanor was important. It became quiet because the Duke had made her important. Only moments earlier, she had been the easiest person in the room to ignore. Now every eye was fixed on her. Eleanor could feel the weight of hundreds of stares pressing against her skin. She slowly looked down at the Duke's hand wrapped around hers. His fingers were strong, warm, and completely steady. Hers were trembling. "My wife," she whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened. Yes, a sharp laugh came from somewhere behind them. It was Lady Victoria Ashcombe, the most admired young woman in the ballroom. She stepped forward, her diamonds catching the candlelight. "Your Grace," Victoria said with a smile that contained no warmth. "Surely there has been some misunderstanding." Adrian turned his head. "There has not." Victoria's smile faltered. "But Eleanor Vale," she looked Eleanor up and down. "She isn't even from a proper family." A few people laughed nervously. Eleanor felt her face burn. Victoria continued, "She has no fortune, no title, no connections. She barely speaks at dinner. Surely you don't mean to suggest that she is the woman you intend to marry?" Adrian's expression remained unreadable. "I do." The room seemed to shrink. Victoria glanced at Eleanor again. "Then perhaps your Grace has not seen her properly." That earned another ripple of laughter. Eleanor had heard variations of those words her entire life. Not beautiful enough, not wealthy enough, not educated enough, not important enough. Always someone's lesser choice. Her father had once apologized to a wealthy guest because Eleanor had accidentally been seated at the main table. Her cousins called her the Shadow. At school, girls had borrowed her books and forgotten to return them because they assumed she would never complain. And tonight, she had come to the ball wearing a dress that had belonged to her older sister. The sleeves had been altered. The hem was slightly uneven. Even the pearl buttons were missing from the left cuff. She had known before entering the ballroom that people would notice. She simply hadn't expected the Duke to notice too. Adrian looked at the people surrounding them. "Is this amusing?" No one answered. His voice became colder. "I asked a simple question." Silence. Victoria lowered her eyes. "No, Your Grace." "Then stop laughing." The laughter vanished completely. Eleanor stared at him. Why was he defending her? He barely knew her. Or did he? That question lingered in her mind. Had he noticed her before tonight? Had he seen the way the other women spoke to her? Had he watched her standing alone near the servants' corridor? Eleanor looked around the ballroom. The same people who had laughed at her 5 minutes earlier were suddenly studying the floor. And somehow that felt worse, because now they were afraid of the man standing beside her, not respectful of her, afraid of him. Eleanor gently tried to withdraw her hand. Adrian immediately noticed. His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Don't." She looked up. "I don't belong here." His eyes hardened. "Neither did half the people who just laughed at you." A startled breath escaped her. For the first time that evening, Eleanor almost smiled. Almost. Then a familiar voice cut through the room. Her aunt. Lady Margaret Vale approached with an expression of carefully manufactured embarrassment. Eleanor's shoulders stiffened. Lady Margaret looked at Adrian and curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, I sincerely apologize." Adrian's eyebrow lifted. "For what?" "For my niece's behavior." Eleanor's heart sank. She has always been rather difficult to manage. Adrian looked at Eleanor, then back at her aunt. "What behavior?" Lady Margaret hesitated. "She should never have interrupted your evening." "I don't recall being interrupted." She has a tendency to misunderstand her position. There it was. The sentence Eleanor had heard 100 times. Know your position. Don't embarrass the family. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't expect too much. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Adrian noticed. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A dangerous stillness settled over him. "Lady Margaret," he said quietly, "what exactly is Eleanor's position?" Her aunt blinked. "I beg your pardon. I asked what her position is." Lady Margaret glanced at Eleanor. "She is my niece. That was not my question." The room became painfully silent. Adrian took one step closer to Eleanor. He still held her hand. Then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "From this moment forward, her position is beside me." No one laughed. No one dared. Eleanor looked at him, unable to understand how a man she had met only minutes ago could make her feel safer than people who had known her for years. But Adrian wasn't finished. He turned toward the ballroom. "If anyone here has a problem with the woman I have chosen, they may bring that problem directly to me." His gaze swept across the room. No one moved. Then he looked back at Eleanor. "Now," his voice softened, "would you like to leave?" Eleanor hesitated. She looked at the ballroom, at the people who had mocked her, at the women who had once made her feel invisible. Then she looked at the man holding her hand. "Yes, Your Grace." Adrian nodded. "Then we leave." And as they walked toward the doors together, Eleanor realized something that frightened her more than all the whispers in the ballroom. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was wealthy, not because she could offer him anything, but simply because he had looked at her and decided she mattered. The carriage rolled through the darkening streets of London, but Eleanor barely noticed the passing lamps. She sat opposite the Duke, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Outside, rain tapped against the carriage windows. Inside, the silence felt different, not uncomfortable, expectant. Eleanor finally gathered enough courage to look at him. "Your Grace." Adrian lifted his eyes from the window. "Yes, why me?" He didn't answer. Eleanor swallowed. "You could have chosen Lady Victoria or any of the other women at the ball. They have money, families, beauty." Adrian's expression remained unreadable. "I know. Then why did you choose me?" His gaze settled on her face. For one long moment he said nothing. Then he asked quietly, "Do you remember what happened 3 years ago?" Eleanor frowned. 3 years ago, at Blackwood Manor. Her fingers tightened. She remembered the place. She remembered being 17. She remembered hiding in the library after her uncle's guests had laughed at her. But she didn't understand why he was asking. "What about it?" Adrian leaned back. "Someone saved my life that night." Eleanor stared at him. "I don't understand. You weren't supposed to." A chill moved through her. "Your Grace, what are you talking about?" Adrian looked out the window again. "When I entered the ballroom tonight, I recognized you." Eleanor's breath caught. "You recognized me?" "Immediately." She searched his face. "But we've never met. Not officially." The words landed heavily between them. Eleanor felt her heartbeat quicken. Then Adrian reached inside his coat. He removed a small object wrapped in dark cloth. He placed it on the seat between them. Eleanor stared at it. A silver locket, her locket, the same locket that had belonged to her mother. Her hand flew to her throat. "How do you have that?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "Because I have been looking for its owner for 3 years. Eleanor couldn't speak. She touched the locket hanging around her neck. It was identical, except for one tiny difference. On the back of Adrian's locket was engraved a date Eleanor had never seen before. "What does that mean?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked another question. "Who told you your mother died before you were old enough to remember her?" Eleanor froze. "My father." "Did you ever see her grave?" "No." "Did you ever see a death certificate?" "No." "Did anyone in your family ever speak about what happened to her?" Eleanor's face went pale. "They said she was ill." Adrian's jaw tightened. They lied. The carriage seemed suddenly too small. Eleanor stared at him. "My mother is dead. Perhaps. His eyes met hers. "That is the first thing I need you to understand." Eleanor shook her head. "Why would you know anything about my mother?" Adrian looked down at the silver locket. "Because your mother once came to my father." Eleanor's breath stopped, and she wasn't alone. The carriage continued through the rain. Eleanor could hear nothing except the pounding of her own heart. Who was with her? Adrian's expression hardened. "That is the second thing I need you to understand." He leaned forward. "The reason I chose you tonight has nothing to do with pity." Eleanor waited. "Someone in your family has been hiding the truth from you." Her stomach twisted. "Who?" Adrian's answer was barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet." He paused. "But I intend to find out." Eleanor stared at the man across from her. The Duke had taken her hand in front of an entire ballroom. He had called her his wife. And now she was beginning to realize that perhaps the marriage wasn't an impulsive act at all. Perhaps Adrian Blackwood had been searching for her long before she ever knew his name. But one question terrified her more than all the others. If the Duke had known her for 3 years, why had he waited until tonight to claim her? Eleanor had spent most of her life learning how to disappear. It was not a talent she had been born with. It was one she had been taught. At 22, she knew exactly where to stand at a crowded dinner table, so no one would notice she had been given the smallest portion. She knew how to enter a room without interrupting a conversation. She knew how to smile when someone forgot her name. And, most importantly, she knew how to remain silent when her family reminded her that she was fortunate simply to have a place among them. She was the daughter of a disgraced second son. That was how her relatives described her. Never Eleanor. Never Miss Vale. just the daughter of the man who had ruined his inheritance. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving behind debts, unanswered questions, and a family that had decided Eleanor was one burden too many. Her aunt had taken her in, but taking her in had never meant loving her. Eleanor had been given a small room beneath the servants' staircase. She had inherited dresses after her cousins had finished with them. She had learned to mend her own gloves, and when guests arrived, she was expected to stay out of sight unless someone needed another cup of tea. Yet there was something her family had never understood about Eleanor. Silence had taught her to listen, neglect had taught her to observe, and being underestimated had given her the freedom to notice things other people never saw. She noticed when servants were frightened. She noticed when a gentleman lied. She noticed when someone's smile did not reach their eyes. And 3 years ago, she had noticed something about a stranger at Blackwood Manor, a wounded man standing alone in a dark library, a man whose name she had never learned, a man bleeding through his shirt while everyone else celebrated downstairs. Eleanor had found him by accident. She had brought him water. She had torn a strip from her own sleeve to bind his wound, and before she could ask who he was, he had disappeared. She had never forgotten his eyes, grey, cold, and strangely familiar. Now, 3 years later, those same eyes belonged to the man sitting across from her in a dark carriage. Adrian Blackwood, the Duke of Blackwood. At 31, Adrian possessed everything Eleanor had never had, a title that opened every door, an estate that stretched for thousands of acres, a fortune large enough to make ordinary men uncomfortable, and a reputation that made even arrogant aristocrats choose their words carefully. But wealth had not made Adrian gentle. It had made him guarded. His father had died when Adrian was 25. His elder brother had followed 2 years later. His younger sister had married and moved to France. One by one, the people Adrian had trusted had disappeared from his life. He had learned not to depend on anyone. He had learned that affection created weaknesses, and weakness in his world was something ambitious people could smell from across a room. There was another reason he kept everyone at a distance. The scar beneath his collar had come from the night he nearly died at Blackwood Manor. Someone had attacked him, someone inside his father's household. The investigation had failed, the attacker had vanished, and the only person who had helped Adrian that night had disappeared before he could discover her name. For 3 years he had searched, quietly, patiently, without telling anyone why, until tonight. Until Eleanor walked into his ballroom wearing a borrowed dress and carrying an old silver locket. The moment Adrian saw that locket, he knew, not because of the jewelry itself, because of the engraving on the back, a symbol he had seen once before, on a letter his father had hidden before his death. Adrian had spent 3 years trying to understand what that symbol meant. Now it was hanging around Eleanor's neck, and suddenly the woman everyone considered insignificant had become the most important person in his world. But Adrian did not know the truth yet. He did not know whether Eleanor was connected to the conspiracy that had nearly killed him. He did not know why her mother had disappeared, and he certainly did not know whether marrying Eleanor would save her, or place her directly in the path of the people who had been hunting her family for years. Across from him, Eleanor watched the rain slide down the carriage window. She looked frightened, but she wasn't crying. Adrian noticed that. Most people cried when they were afraid. Eleanor became quieter. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. She turned toward him, a little. He studied her. Why? Because everyone else seems to be. For the first time that evening, something almost resembling amusement touched his eyes. "And you?" Eleanor hesitated. "I don't know you well enough to decide." Adrian looked away. It was the first honest answer anyone had given him in years. He had expected tears. He had expected gratitude. He had expected a frightened young woman, desperate to understand why a duke had suddenly claimed her. Instead, Eleanor had given him uncertainty, and somehow that interested him more than beauty ever could. "Good," he said. She frowned. "Good. I would rather you fear what you understand than trust what you don't." Eleanor studied him for a moment. Then she asked quietly, "Do you trust me?" Adrian's expression became unreadable again. No, her heart sank. But, he added, I believe you. Eleanor didn't understand the difference. Not yet. And Adrian wasn't ready to explain it. Because there were some truths a man could reveal only after he was certain the woman standing beside him would survive hearing them. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside the carriage, the Duke and the forgotten girl sat facing each other in silence. Neither of them knew it yet, but their marriage would uncover a secret powerful enough to destroy both their families. And before Eleanor could become the Duchess of Blackwood, she would have to discover why someone had spent years making sure nobody remembered she existed. The carriage stopped before Blackwood House just after midnight. Eleanor stared through the window. The estate rose beyond the iron gates like something from another world. 3 stories of black stone, hundreds of dark windows, tall towers disappearing into the mist. She had seen the house once before, 3 years ago, but tonight it looked different, perhaps because she was no longer arriving as a nobody who had slipped through a servant's corridor. Tonight she was arriving beside the Duke. The carriage door opened. Adrian stepped down first. He turned and offered his hand. Eleanor hesitated. Then she placed her fingers in his palm. His grip closed around hers, warm, steady, possessive without being forceful. The footmen lowered their eyes. The housekeeper waited beneath the enormous entrance arch. Everyone was watching. Eleanor felt the old instinct rise inside her. Disappear, make yourself smaller, give them nothing to criticize. But Adrian didn't release her hand. Instead, he walked beside her up the stone steps. At the top, he stopped. Eleanor, she looked at him. Yes, when we enter this house, you will walk beside me. She frowned. I was planning to. No, his voice was quiet. You were planning to walk behind me. Her cheeks warmed. He had noticed. Of course he had. I don't know how to be a duchess. I didn't ask you to. Then what do you want from me? Adrian looked at her for several seconds. Honesty. The answer surprised her. Nothing else? Nothing else. He opened the great doors. Warm candlelight spilled across the steps. The servants stood in 2 perfect lines. The Duke entered first, then Eleanor, together. A murmur moved through the hall. The Duchess. Already they were whispering. Eleanor heard one servant quietly ask another whether the Duke had truly lost his mind. She almost smiled. It was the same question she had been asking herself all evening. Inside the drawing room, 3 women were waiting. Lady Victoria, Lady Amelia, and the Duchess Dowager, Adrian's mother. The older woman sat rigidly beside the fireplace. Her silver hair was pulled into a severe knot. Her eyes went immediately to Eleanor, then to their joined hands. Her expression hardened. Adrian. Mother, you cannot be serious. I am. The Dowager Duchess slowly stood. Who is she? Adrian didn't look at Eleanor. Eleanor Vale. I know her name. His mother stepped closer. I am asking who she is. Eleanor felt the old humiliation return. She knew what the woman meant. What family? What fortune? What title? What usefulness? Adrian answered before Eleanor could. She is the woman I intend to marry. Silence. His mother stared at him. Marry? Yes, her. Adrian's jaw tightened. Is there an echo in this room? The Dowager Duchess ignored the remark. You have refused every suitable match for 6 years. I have. Lady Victoria's family controls half the western estates. I know. Lady Amelia has a fortune of her own. I know. Then why would you choose this girl? Eleanor lowered her eyes. She already knew the answer everyone expected. Because she was convenient, because she was poor, because she would ask for nothing, because she was easy to control. But Adrian said something else, because she is the only woman in that ballroom who did not want anything from me. Eleanor looked up. He continued. Everyone else saw a duke. His eyes settled on her. She saw a tired man. The room went silent. Eleanor's breath caught. The Dowager Duchess studied her carefully. That is your reason? No. Adrian's voice became colder. My reason is that I trust my instincts. You are making a mistake. Perhaps. His mother stepped closer. Then at least tell me what you know about her. Adrian didn't answer. Eleanor noticed. The question had struck something he was hiding. The silver locket suddenly felt heavy against her throat. The Dowager Duchess noticed it, too. Her face changed, only for a second, but Eleanor saw it. Fear, real fear. Then it disappeared. "What is that?" the older woman asked. "My mother's locket." The Dowager Duchess stared at it. Adrian immediately noticed her reaction. "Mother?" She looked away. "It is nothing." But Adrian knew it wasn't, and Eleanor knew it too. Before anyone could speak again, Adrian took Eleanor's hand. "That settles it." His mother turned sharply. "What settles what?" "My decision." He looked at Eleanor. Then, in front of everyone in the room, he lifted her hand to his lips. "We will marry within the week." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Within the week?" Adrian nodded. "Unless you object." Everyone looked at her. The question was suddenly hers to answer. For 22 years, Eleanor had been told what she was allowed to want, what she was allowed to wear, where she was allowed to sit, when she was allowed to speak. Now the most powerful man she had ever met was asking her what she wanted. She looked at him. "Why are you asking me?" His expression softened. "Because this is the first decision that should belong to you." Eleanor's throat tightened. She looked at his extended hand, then at the cold faces around the room, then back at Adrian. "What happens if I say no?" He answered without hesitation. "I will take you home myself." No anger, no threat, no pressure, just certainty. And somehow, that frightened her more than force ever could, because nobody had ever given Eleanor the freedom to say no. She slowly placed her hand in his. "I won't say no." The Duke's fingers closed around hers. His mother stared at them. Victoria looked as though she had been slapped, and Eleanor felt something she had never expected to feel in the house of the man who had once been a stranger. She felt chosen, but there was one thing she still didn't know. Adrian had not chosen her simply because she was different. He had chosen her because 3 years ago, on the darkest night of his life, a frightened young woman had saved him, and tonight he had finally discovered her name. What Eleanor didn't know was that someone else had recognized that locket too, and they had already begun moving through the shadows of Blackwood House. The wedding took place 4 days later. There was no grand celebration, no orchestra, no crowded ballroom filled with laughing aristocrats. Adrian had made it clear that he wanted a private ceremony. Eleanor suspected the real reason was simpler. He did not want anyone turning their marriage into entertainment. She stood beneath the old stone arches of Blackwood Chapel, wearing a simple ivory gown. It wasn't extravagant. There were no diamonds in her hair, no elaborate necklace, only her mother's silver locket resting against her throat. Adrian stood opposite her in a black coat. His expression was calm, almost unreadable. When the priest asked whether he accepted Eleanor as his wife, his answer came immediately. "I do." Then it was Eleanor's turn. She looked at him. For one strange second, she remembered the ballroom, the laughter, the whispers, the moment he had taken her hand. She swallowed. "I do." And just like that, Eleanor Vale became the Duchess of Blackwood. But the title changed faster than the woman did. The moment the ceremony ended, Adrian released her hand. He didn't kiss her. He didn't whisper anything romantic. He simply offered his arm. "We should go." Eleanor placed her hand through his arm. "Where?" "Home." She looked at him. "You mean the estate?" Adrian's eyes softened slightly. "No." He glanced toward the chapel doors. "I mean ours." Those 2 words stayed with her throughout the journey. Ours. She wasn't sure what they meant yet. Neither was he. Blackwood House was enormous. Too enormous. Eleanor had imagined that becoming a duchess would mean servants rushing to meet her. Instead, she discovered rooms so large that her footsteps seemed to disappear inside them. Adrian gave her a tour. The library, the conservatory, the west wing, the gardens, the dining room. Finally, he stopped outside a set of double doors. "This is your room." Eleanor looked at him. "My room?" "Yes." She glanced at the doors, then back at him. "And yours?" "Across the hall." Something inside her tightened. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps she had expected a husband and wife to share a room. Perhaps she had expected more, or perhaps she had simply forgotten that this marriage had begun as a decision neither of them had fully understood. Adrian seemed to notice her expression. "You deserve your own space. Of course. If you need anything, tell Mrs. Whitmore." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you." He started to leave, then stopped. "Eleanor," she looked up, "you don't have to earn your place here." Her eyes widened. He continued before she could answer. "This is your home." Then he walked away. Eleanor stood alone in the doorway. For years, she had been told that every room she entered belonged to someone else. Now a duke had given her an entire wing of his estate and told her she belonged. She wasn't sure what frightened her more, the generosity or how badly she wanted to believe him. The first week of their marriage was quiet, almost painfully quiet. They ate breakfast together. Sometimes they spoke during dinner, occasionally, and most evenings Adrian disappeared into his study. Eleanor learned quickly that he worked late, very late. There were nights when the clock struck midnight before she saw him. She didn't complain. She knew what loneliness looked like. She simply didn't know whether he wanted her company, so she waited. At first, their conversations were practical. "How was your day?" "Busy." "Did you sleep?" "Enough." "Do you need anything?" "No." 4 questions, 4 answers. That was marriage, at least for now. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with breakfast. One morning, Eleanor reached for the tea. She poured a cup for herself, then stopped. She remembered something. Adrian never took sugar. She poured a second cup. No sugar. She carried it across the table. He looked at the cup, then at her. "You remembered." Eleanor smiled faintly. "You mentioned it. I mentioned it once. That was enough." Adrian stared at her for a moment. Then he took the cup. "Thank you." It was such a small thing, but Eleanor noticed something strange. The Duke drank the entire cup. A few days later, Eleanor found Adrian in the library. He was sitting near the fireplace with a book open beside him. She didn't want to interrupt, so she turned to leave. "You can stay." She stopped. "Are you sure?" He looked at the empty chair opposite him. "I wouldn't have said it otherwise." Eleanor sat. For nearly 20 minutes, neither spoke. She read. He worked. The fire crackled between them. It should have felt awkward. Instead, it felt peaceful. Eventually, Eleanor looked up. "You read that book before." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "You've read it. Twice. Why?" She shrugged. "Because the ending makes me angry." A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Finally, something we agree on." Eleanor smiled. It was the first time she had seen him almost laugh, and suddenly she understood something. Adrian didn't dislike silence. He disliked noise. There was a difference. Their next moment came by accident. Eleanor was walking through the gardens when she found Adrian near the old rose wall. He was holding a small pruning knife. She stared. "You garden." Adrian looked at the roses. "No, you're holding a pruning knife." "I was attempting to remove a dead branch." "And?" He glanced at the branch. "I believe the branch won." Eleanor laughed before she could stop herself. Adrian looked at her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he handed her the knife. "Show me." She blinked. "Show you? You're laughing. Because you nearly destroyed the rose. Then perhaps you should save it." Eleanor took the knife. She stepped beside him. Their shoulders nearly touched. She carefully removed the damaged branch. "There." Adrian studied the rose. "You make that look easy." "It isn't." "Then why did you make it look easy?" Eleanor smiled. "Because someone has to." He looked at her differently after that. Not like a duchess, not like a wife, like a woman he was beginning to understand. That evening, Eleanor discovered a book waiting outside her bedroom. She picked it up. It was the novel they had discussed in the library. Inside the cover was a small handwritten note. "The ending is still terrible." Eleanor smiled. She carried the book into her room. The next morning, she left a note outside Adrian's study. "Only because you don't understand it." When Adrian found it, he stared at the handwriting for several seconds. Then, for the first time in years, he laughed, quietly, alone, but genuinely. Neither of them mentioned the notes. They didn't need to. Something was changing. Not dramatically, Not yet. There were no passionate declarations, no stolen kisses, no promises, only tea without sugar. Books left outside doors, quiet conversations beside fireplaces, a shared laugh in the garden, and two people slowly discovering that silence did not always mean loneliness. Sometimes, silence meant trust. One evening, Eleanor was preparing tea when she heard Adrian enter the room. She looked over her shoulder. He was standing in the doorway. "You don't have to make that." "I know. Then why do you?" She looked down at the cup. "Because you like it." Adrian was silent. Then he walked toward her. He stopped beside the table. "Eleanor." She looked up. "What?" "I don't think anyone has ever remembered the small things about me." Her expression softened. "Perhaps they were too busy trying to impress you. And you?" She smiled. "I'm still trying to figure you out." Something warm flickered in his eyes. "How is that going?" Eleanor lifted the teacup. "Terribly." For a moment, Adrian simply stared at her. Then he smiled. Not the polite smile of a duke, a real one. Small, rare, entirely hers. And Eleanor realized something that frightened her. She was beginning to look forward to seeing him smile. But neither of them knew that someone else had begun watching those small changes. Someone in Blackwood House had noticed the Duke was no longer as distant as he had been. Someone had noticed Eleanor's influence, and whoever was watching did not like what they saw. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor noticed it before breakfast. She was walking through the eastern corridor when she heard two men arguing behind a half-open door. "Those numbers cannot be correct." "They are, sir." "They aren't." Eleanor slowed. The voices belonged to Mr. Hale, the Duke's estate manager, and one of the senior clerks. She should have kept walking. Instead, she stopped. "Show me the ledger again." Paper rustled. "The southern farms have lost nearly 40% of their expected income. Because of the weather? No." A pause. "Because someone is selling the grain below market price." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She continued walking, but she remembered the number. 40%. At breakfast, Adrian was reading a stack of correspondence. Eleanor watched him over her teacup. "You are losing money." He looked up. "What?" "Your southern farms." The newspaper slowly lowered. "How do you know that?" "I heard Mr. Hale speaking." Adrian's expression hardened. "You were listening?" "I was passing the door." And the door was open." He studied her. "That is not an answer." Eleanor placed her cup down. "No. The answer is that your estate is losing money because someone is selling your grain cheaply." Adrian leaned back. "Mr. Hale believes it is a temporary problem." "Then Mr. Hale is wrong." Silence. Adrian stared at her. "Why?" "Because temporary problems don't produce the same numbers for 3 consecutive quarters." His expression changed. "You've seen the ledgers?" "No." "Then how can you know?" Eleanor hesitated. "I don't know." Adrian waited. "I suspect." That answer should have irritated him. Instead, it made him curious. "What do you suspect?" "The numbers don't match." "Explain." Eleanor reached for a blank sheet of paper. She wrote 3 figures. "Your harvest was lower this year." Adrian nodded. "Your workers were paid more." "Yes." "Your transportation costs increased." "Yes." "And yet the estate's reported income fell by almost half." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "That's because grain prices dropped. Not enough." She tapped the paper. "If the market price had fallen as much as Mr. Hale claims, every neighboring estate would be reporting the same loss." Adrian stared at her. "Have you compared them?" "No." "Then how?" "The carriage drivers talk." She shrugged. "They bring letters. They complain about roads. They discuss prices while waiting for the horses." Adrian was silent. Eleanor continued. "Yesterday, one of your drivers mentioned that Lord Ashbury's estate sold almost the same quantity of grain at a much higher price." Adrian slowly put down his papers. "How much higher?" "Nearly 20%. His eyes sharpened. "How did you remember that?" "I remember things people think are unimportant." The words hung between them. Adrian looked at her differently. That sentence, he had heard it before. Not from her, from himself. 3 years ago, in the dark library, the mysterious young woman who had bandaged his wound had said something almost identical. People notice important things. They forget small ones. He stared at Eleanor. Who taught you accounting? No one. Business? No one. Then where did you learn to read financial ledgers? My father. Adrian's expression softened. He taught you? When I was young. What happened? He died. Eleanor looked down, but before he did, he told me that numbers tell the truth even when people don't. Adrian was quiet. Then he pushed a thick ledger across the table. Show me. Eleanor looked at him. Now. She opened it. For the next hour, the breakfast table disappeared beneath papers. Eleanor studied entries, cross-referenced dates, compared transportation costs, checked grain quantities. Adrian watched her. She didn't perform. She didn't seek approval. She simply worked. Her finger stopped on one page. This. Adrian leaned closer. What? This shipment. What about it? The quantity is wrong. He frowned. How? The warehouse record says 600 sacks, and the payment receipt says 800. Adrian went still. Eleanor turned another page. Here. Another discrepancy. Then another. 3 shipments. Different dates, different buyers, the same missing quantity. Adrian's voice became cold. Someone is stealing from me. Eleanor looked up. Yes. He stared at the ledger, then at her. How long did it take you to find the pattern? She thought. 20 minutes. Adrian almost smiled. Mr. Hale had spent 3 months investigating the same problem. He had found nothing. Eleanor had found it before finishing breakfast. Adrian stood. Come with me. Where? To the estate office. She blinked. Why? Because I want you to see something. The estate office fell silent when Adrian entered. Mr. Hale immediately stood. Your Grace. Adrian placed the ledger on the desk. Explain this. Mr. Hale's face changed. I don't understand. The missing grain. The manager looked at Eleanor, then back at Adrian. I assure you, don't. Adrian's voice stopped him. You've been investigating this for 3 months. Yes, Your Grace. My wife found the discrepancy in less than an hour. The room became silent. Mr. Hale stared at Eleanor. Your wife. Adrian looked at him. Yes. There was something different in the way he said it this time, not because Eleanor was standing beside him, but because he was proud to say it. Mr. Hale swallowed. I didn't realize Her Grace had an interest in estate accounts. She does now. Eleanor looked at Adrian. He gave her the smallest nod. Go on. So she did. She pointed to the records. These shipments are being recorded twice. Mr. Hale stepped closer. Impossible. Then explain the signatures. He looked. Eleanor continued. The warehouse records are legitimate. The second receipts are not. Mr. Hale's face drained of color. Who signed them? That's what we need to find out. Adrian looked at his manager. Start with the warehouse supervisor. Mr. Hale nodded. Immediately. As the man hurried away, Adrian remained beside Eleanor. You were right. She looked at him. About the numbers. About everything. Eleanor smiled faintly. I was only guessing. No. Adrian's eyes remained on her. You were observing. He reached for the ledger, then stopped. You know what your problem is? She raised an eyebrow. What? You have no idea how capable you are. Eleanor laughed softly. That's because nobody has ever needed me to be. Adrian's expression changed. For once he didn't have an answer. That evening, Eleanor found him in the library. He was standing beside the window. She entered quietly. You sent for me. Yes. She approached. Adrian turned. I spoke with the warehouse supervisor. And he disappeared. Eleanor froze. What? He left the estate less than an hour ago. Her stomach tightened. Then he knew. Yes. Adrian stepped closer. He knew someone had discovered the theft. Eleanor looked at him. Because of me? Because of us? She didn't understand. Adrian's gaze lowered briefly to the silver locket at her throat. The moment you found those numbers, you became part of something you don't understand. Eleanor's fingers closed around the locket. Then perhaps you should finally tell me what you do understand. Adrian said nothing. She waited. What happened 3 years ago? His face hardened. Not tonight. Why? Because if I tell you, you may never sleep peacefully again. Eleanor held his gaze. I haven't slept peacefully since I married you. Something flickered across his face. Concern. Real concern. He reached out. His fingers touched hers. Just once. A brief, almost hesitant gesture. But Eleanor didn't pull away. Neither did he. For several seconds, they stood that way. No titles, no duke, no duchess, just two people holding hands in a quiet library. Then Adrian whispered, "You should never have been made to feel like a nobody." Eleanor's eyes softened. Perhaps I needed someone to notice. I noticed. She looked up. When? Adrian's expression became distant. "Long before you noticed me," and Eleanor suddenly understood. The mystery between them was deeper than she had imagined. Her competence had revealed more than a financial crime. It had revealed something else. Adrian had not simply chosen a woman he found interesting. He had been waiting for Eleanor, and somewhere in the shadows of Blackwood House, someone knew exactly why. For the first time since their wedding, Adrian began looking for Eleanor, not because he needed her, because he wanted her there. He noticed it one morning, when breakfast was already on the table and her chair was empty. He looked toward the doorway. "Where is the Duchess?" The servant hesitated. "Her Grace is in the West Garden, Your Grace." Adrian frowned. "Why?" "She said she wanted to inspect the workers' cottages." Adrian stared at the empty chair. He had spent years eating breakfast alone. He had never cared. Now the silence bothered him. That realization irritated him more than it should have. Eleanor was standing beside the old stone cottages when Adrian found her. Her dress was simple. Her hair had come loose from its pins. A few strands moved across her cheek in the morning wind. She was speaking with an elderly woman who held a basket of vegetables. Adrian stopped several yards away. He watched. Eleanor wasn't behaving like a duchess. She was listening. Actually listening. The woman spoke for nearly 5 minutes. Eleanor didn't interrupt once. When the woman finished, Eleanor nodded. "I'll speak with Mr. Hale." The woman shook her head quickly. "No, Your Grace. Please don't make trouble." Eleanor smiled. "Then I won't make trouble." She glanced toward the leaking roof above them. "I'll simply make sure it stops raining inside your kitchen." The woman laughed. Adrian almost smiled. Almost. When Eleanor finally noticed him, her expression changed. "Your Grace, how long have you been here?" "An hour. You skipped breakfast. I wasn't hungry." Adrian looked at her. "You should eat." She raised an eyebrow. "Was that an order?" "No." "Good." A faint smile appeared on her lips. "Because I wasn't planning to obey." Adrian stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Eleanor's smile widened. "There. What? You laughed again." "I didn't. You did." "I was clearing my throat." "Of course." He looked away, but she could see the amusement in his eyes. Something had changed between them. Neither of them knew exactly when. That afternoon, Adrian found Eleanor in his study. She was reading the estate reports. He stopped in the doorway. "You've taken over my desk." She looked up. "Your desk was more convenient. You could have asked. You were busy." "I am always busy." "Exactly." Adrian walked toward her. She pushed a document across the desk. "I found another discrepancy." His expression immediately became serious. "Where?" "The Western timber contracts." He read the figures, then looked at her. "You found this without my asking." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was curious." He stared at her. "Curiosity is dangerous. So is ignoring numbers." Adrian smiled. "You're becoming difficult." Eleanor closed the ledger. "I thought you liked difficult." His smile disappeared. Not because he was angry, because suddenly he was looking at her mouth. Eleanor noticed. The room became strangely quiet. Neither moved. Adrian's gaze returned to her eyes. "Perhaps I do." Her heartbeat quickened. She lowered her eyes. "I should finish these accounts." "Yes." Neither of them moved. Then Adrian stepped back. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night." He left. Eleanor waited until the door closed. Then she placed a hand against her chest. Her heart was beating far too quickly. The next morning, Adrian was different. Not colder, more careful. He no longer stood too close. He no longer let his fingers linger when passing her a cup. He seemed determined to create distance. Eleanor noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. At dinner, she finally asked, "Have I done something wrong?" Adrian looked up. "No." Then why are you avoiding me? His fork stopped. I am not. You haven't looked at me for 10 minutes. I have been eating. You've been staring at your plate. A small silence followed. Then Adrian leaned back. You want the truth? Yes. He studied her. You're making it difficult for me to remember that this marriage was supposed to be practical. Eleanor's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. Adrian continued. I chose you because I believed you were the one person I could trust. And now I trust you too much. Her heart raced. What is wrong with that? Nothing. His voice became quieter. That's the problem. Eleanor looked down. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then she asked, Do you regret marrying me? Adrian's answer came immediately. Never. She looked up. His expression was completely serious. I regret only one thing. What? That I waited 3 years to find you. Eleanor couldn't breathe for a moment. Later that evening, rain began falling against the windows. Eleanor stood in the library, reaching for a book on the highest shelf. Her fingers barely touched it. She stretched, still nothing. Then a hand appeared above hers. Adrian took the book down effortlessly. He turned. They were standing much too close. Eleanor could feel the warmth of him. She looked up. He looked down. Neither spoke. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The fire crackled behind them. Adrian's eyes moved briefly to her lips. Eleanor noticed. This time, neither looked away. His hand remained on the book. Her fingers were still resting against the cover. Their hands touched, a small thing, but neither moved. Adrian whispered, Eleanor, yes, if I kiss you. He stopped. She waited. What? I don't want it to be because you're my wife. Her voice was barely audible. Then don't. His eyes searched hers. Are you certain? Eleanor nodded. Yes. He leaned closer, then stopped. He touched his forehead gently against hers. Not a kiss, not yet, just closeness, a promise without words. I've spent years believing that wanting someone made a man weak, he whispered. Eleanor closed her eyes, and now, Adrian's breath was warm against her cheek. Now I think not wanting you would be harder. Her eyes opened. She looked at him. For once, the feared Duke of Blackwood didn't look powerful. He looked vulnerable. And Eleanor realized that perhaps this was the greatest trust he could give her. Not his title, not his fortune, not his protection, himself. She lifted her hand and touched his cheek. Adrian closed his eyes. For one quiet moment, the distance between them disappeared. Then a sound came from the corridor. Footsteps. They separated immediately. Adrian's expression hardened. Eleanor looked toward the door. The footsteps stopped. Someone had been listening. Adrian moved in front of Eleanor. His voice dropped. Stay here. She frowned. Why? Because whoever was outside that door knows we're no longer pretending this marriage is only an arrangement. Eleanor looked at him. And why would that matter? Adrian's eyes darkened. Because there are people who wanted you forgotten. He looked toward the closed door. And now they have a reason to fear you. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the silver locket. The warmth of the moment was gone, but something else had taken its place, a certainty. Adrian wasn't merely attracted to her anymore. He was beginning to love her, and whoever had been watching them had just learned exactly where the Duke of Blackwood was most vulnerable. The first scream came just before dawn. Eleanor woke suddenly. For a moment, she didn't know what had pulled her from sleep. Then she heard it again, a horse, running. Then another sound, a bell, the estate alarm. She threw open her bedroom door. What's happening? A servant stood at the end of the corridor, pale and breathless. Your Grace, what is it? The Eastern barns. He swallowed. They're on fire. Eleanor's heart stopped. She ran. By the time she reached the courtyard, the eastern sky was glowing orange. Flames climbed above the roof of the largest barn. Smoke rolled across the estate. Servants rushed toward the water pumps. Men shouted instructions. Horses screamed from the stables. And somewhere inside the chaos, Eleanor heard Adrian's voice. Get the horses out. He appeared through the smoke. His coat was thrown over his shoulders. His hair was disordered. His face was hard. Eleanor, she turned. He crossed the courtyard toward her. What are you doing outside? I heard the alarm. Go back inside. No. His eyes narrowed. Eleanor, people are still in the east wing. I'll handle it. She shook her head. The wind is moving toward the workers' cottages. Adrian looked toward the flames. She was right. The fire wasn't simply spreading. It was being pushed directly toward the cottages. Get everyone out, Eleanor said. Adrian stared at her. How? The old irrigation channel. What about it? It runs behind the cottages. That channel hasn't been used in years. It doesn't need to be used. She pointed toward the stone wall. The gate is still there. Adrian immediately turned. Take 6 men. Open it. A servant ran. Eleanor grabbed another man's sleeve. Wake every family in the eastern cottages. Don't wait for them to collect anything. The man nodded and ran. Adrian looked at her. For 1 second, the chaos disappeared. He saw the same woman everyone had once called insignificant. But she wasn't frightened. She was thinking, planning, leading. Eleanor, she looked at him. Stay behind me. She shook her head. No, I won't argue. Then don't. She pointed toward the barn. The horses. Adrian followed her gaze. Several terrified animals were trapped behind the burning doors. I'm going in. So am I. Absolutely not. Then don't go. He stared at her. She stared back. Neither moved. Finally, Adrian cursed under his breath. Stay close. They ran toward the stable. The heat hit them immediately. Eleanor covered her mouth with her sleeve. Smoke filled her eyes. Adrian kicked open the first stall. Move! The horse bolted past them. Another followed, then another, but one remained. A large black stallion was trapped beneath a fallen beam. Adrian rushed toward it. Adrian! He ignored her. He lifted the beam. The horse struggled. The wood shifted. Adrian gritted his teeth. Go! Eleanor saw the roof above them. It was beginning to collapse. Adrian! He looked up. A burning section of timber broke loose. It crashed downward. Eleanor moved without thinking. She grabbed his arm. They fell sideways. The timber struck the floor where he had been standing. Adrian turned toward her. Are you hurt? No. He touched her face. There was blood near her temple. His expression changed instantly. You're bleeding. It's nothing. It isn't nothing. He reached toward her. A sudden explosion shook the building. The remaining horses screamed. Out! Adrian shouted. They ran. The moment they reached the courtyard, part of the barn roof collapsed behind them. Eleanor stumbled. Adrian caught her around the waist. For one breath, she was against his chest. His arms tightened around her. You could have died. So could you. I wasn't thinking about myself. I know. His eyes met hers, and that's what terrifies me. Before either could say more, a rider came galloping through the gates. He jumped from his horse. Your Grace! Adrian turned. What? The western road. The man's face was white. It's blocked. By what? Trees. Adrian frowned. Storm damage? The rider shook his head. No, Your Grace. He hesitated. They were cut down. Silence. Adrian's expression became deadly. How many? Enough to stop the carriages. Eleanor looked at Adrian. The fire wasn't an accident. No, another rider arrived. He was carrying a small black envelope. For Your Grace. Adrian took it. There was no seal, no name, only one sentence written across the front. Ask your wife about her mother. Eleanor went completely still. Adrian opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 3 words were written in black ink. He remembers everything. Eleanor's hands began to tremble. I don't understand. Adrian looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, genuine fear appeared in his eyes. Not fear for himself, for her. Neither do I. He folded the letter. Then another piece of paper fell from the envelope. Eleanor caught it. She looked down. It was an old portrait. A woman stood beside a young girl. Eleanor. She knew the woman immediately. Her mother. But that wasn't what made her blood run cold. Behind them stood a young man, Adrian, 3 years younger, and beside Adrian was another man. A man Eleanor recognized from the portrait hanging in Blackwood House, Adrian's father. The 3 of them had been together, on the exact night Eleanor's mother had supposedly disappeared. Eleanor looked at Adrian. You knew. I didn't. Then why is my mother standing beside your father? I don't know. Her voice broke. You told me you were looking for me. I was. Why? Adrian stepped closer. Because the night I was attacked, your mother was there. Eleanor stared at him. What? She helped me, and then she disappeared. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Everyone told me she died. Adrian reached for her hand. This time, she pulled away. You chose me because of her. His face tightened. At first, I chose you because I believed you were connected to what happened that night. Eleanor stared at him. And now? He stepped closer. Now I would choose you even if there were no mystery. She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to. But before she could answer, the estate alarm sounded again, this time from the north gate. A servant came running. Your Grace, what now? The guards found someone inside the grounds. Adrian's expression hardened. Who? The servant looked at Eleanor, then back at the Duke. A man? Alive? The servant shook his head. Dead. Adrian's hand moved instinctively toward his sword. Where? The old chapel. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. The chapel, the place where she and Adrian had married. Adrian looked at her. Stay here. But Eleanor shook her head. No. Eleanor, if someone came here because of my mother, I need to know why. Adrian stared at her. Then he took her hand. This time he didn't ask her to stay behind. Together, they walked toward the old chapel. Neither spoke, but both understood the truth now. The enemy wasn't watching Blackwood House anymore. The enemy had entered it, and whoever had started the fire, blocked the roads, and left the body in their chapel, had only one purpose: to make sure Eleanor never discovered what happened to her mother. And for the first time, Adrian understood the real danger. The people hunting Eleanor were no longer trying to frighten her. They were trying to kill her. The old chapel was silent, too silent. Adrian pushed the door open. Eleanor, stay behind me. She didn't argue this time. She stepped close enough that her shoulder nearly touched his back. The chapel smelled of smoke and rain. Moonlight entered through the broken stained glass windows, scattering pale fragments of color across the stone floor. At first, Eleanor saw nothing. Then she noticed the body. A man lay beside the altar. His black coat was soaked with rain. One hand rested against his chest. The other was clenched around something. Adrian moved forward. Eleanor followed. Don't. He turned. What? There's blood. Adrian looked down. A thin trail led from the body toward the side door. Someone else had been here, recently. Adrian immediately drew his pistol. Eleanor, she looked at him. Go back. No, this isn't a discussion. It is if you're asking me to leave you. His expression hardened. I am ordering you. She shook her head, and I'm refusing. For a moment they simply stared at each other. Then Adrian stepped closer. You don't understand. Then make me understand. His voice dropped. Someone has already tried to kill you tonight. Eleanor's eyes flickered. The fire, the road, blocked. The man, dead. Adrian looked toward the dark doorway. All of it was designed to keep us here. Eleanor swallowed, and now they know we are investigating. A floorboard creaked. Adrian reacted instantly. He grabbed Eleanor around the waist and pulled her behind a stone pillar. A gunshot exploded through the chapel. The bullet struck the wall where Eleanor had been standing. She gasped. Adrian covered her body with his own. Don't move. Another shot. Stone shattered above them. Eleanor pressed herself against his chest. His arm was wrapped tightly around her. She could feel his heartbeat. Fast, violent. Nothing like the calm man everyone feared. Adrian, quiet. His eyes searched the chapel. He was listening, waiting. Then a shadow moved near the doorway. Adrian raised his pistol. Come out. Nothing. He pushed Eleanor farther behind the pillar. Stay here. No. Eleanor, if you go after him alone, I have done this before and almost died. His eyes met hers. That stopped him. For a moment, the Duke disappeared. There was only the wounded man she had seen 3 years ago. The man in the library. The man bleeding beneath his shirt. The man she had tried to save. You remember? Eleanor whispered it. Adrian's expression changed. Yes, you were the man. He nodded. I knew the moment I saw your locket. Eleanor stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't certain. About what? About whether you were the girl who saved me. He paused. Or someone sent to finish what the attacker started. Her face fell. You thought I could be part of it. I thought everyone could be. And now, Adrian lowered the pistol. Now I know better. The words were quiet, certain. Eleanor looked at him. What changed? You. A sound came from the far side of the chapel. Adrian immediately moved. He fired once. A man stumbled from behind the doorway and disappeared into the rain. Adrian started after him. Eleanor grabbed his sleeve. No. He turned. I have to catch him. Not alone. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. You could have been killed. So could you. That's different. Why? Adrian's jaw tightened. Because I can survive losing money. He stepped closer. I can survive losing an estate. His voice cracked slightly. I can survive losing my title. Eleanor stared at him. But I cannot survive losing you. Silence. The words seemed to shock even him. Adrian looked away. He had never said them, not to anyone. Perhaps not even to himself. Eleanor slowly released his sleeve. You were afraid. He looked at her. Yes. Of losing me? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Eleanor stepped closer. The cold stone wall was behind her. Adrian stood in front of her. His usual control was gone. I thought I knew what fear was, he whispered. I've been shot at. I've fought men who wanted me dead. I've watched people I loved disappear. His eyes lowered. But when that bullet came toward you, he stopped. Eleanor reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately. I couldn't breathe. Her eyes filled with tears. Adrian, he shook his head. I don't want you involved in this. I already am. I can send you somewhere safe. No, I can arrange guards. No, I can send you away from Blackwood. She stepped closer. I won't leave. He looked at her. Why? Eleanor's voice trembled. Because I'm your wife. Something in his expression broke, not dramatically. Just enough. His forehead touched hers. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Adrian whispered, I don't know how to do this. Do what? Love someone. Eleanor's breath caught. He closed his eyes. I know how to command men. I know how to negotiate contracts. I know how to survive. His thumb brushed across the back of her hand. But I don't know how to stand here and tell you that the thought of losing you terrifies me. Eleanor's tears finally fell. She lifted her hand and touched his cheek. You don't have to know. He opened his eyes. You don't? No. She smiled through her tears. You only have to be honest. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, not like a duke protecting his duchess, like. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Adrian held Eleanor as though letting go would somehow make the entire night real again. The fire, the gunshots, the dead man, the letter about her mother. All of it seemed distant now. There was only the warmth of her against him. Eleanor could hear his heartbeat. It was no longer steady. She slowly pulled back enough to see his face. Adrian. He looked at her. I meant what I said, about not knowing how to love. His expression softened. Yes. She gave him a small smile. Then perhaps you should learn. A faint breath escaped him. You make it sound easy. It isn't. No. His thumb brushed gently across her cheek. It isn't. Eleanor's eyes closed for a moment. When she opened them, Adrian was still watching her. I have been trying to understand when it happened, he said. When what happened? When you stopped being the woman I needed to protect. He paused, and became the woman I couldn't imagine living without. Eleanor's breath caught. Adrian looked away briefly, as if the words were more difficult to say than he had expected. I told myself I chose you because of the past. He looked back at her. I told myself it was because your mother was connected to my father's death. Eleanor listened silently. I told myself it was because you were the only person who could help me uncover the truth. His fingers tightened around hers. But those were excuses. Excuses. Reasons I could understand. He stepped closer. The truth was much more dangerous, Eleanor whispered. What truth? Adrian's eyes held hers. I fell in love with you. The words were quiet, almost painfully simple, but Eleanor felt them as if the entire chapel had suddenly gone silent. She stared at him. Adrian gave a small, almost nervous laugh. I had planned to say that differently. How? With dignity, despite everything. Eleanor smiled. And what happened? You happened. Her smile grew. He shook his head. I've spent my entire life controlling everything around me. His voice lowered. Then you walked into my ballroom wearing a borrowed dress, and somehow you became the one thing I couldn't control. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I thought you regretted choosing me. Never. I thought you only wanted the truth about my mother. I did. He gently touched the silver locket at her throat. At first. Then his fingers moved to her cheek. Now I want you. Her heart raced. Adrian, I want your ridiculous arguments. She laughed softly through her tears. I want your habit of remembering things nobody else notices. He smiled. I want you in my library. A pause. In my garden. Another. At my breakfast table. His voice became almost a whisper. I want you beside me when everything is easy. He looked into her eyes, and when everything isn't. Eleanor's tears slipped down her cheeks. That sounds dangerously like a promise. It is. She stepped closer. Then I have one too. Adrian waited. I love you. He closed his eyes. For a moment he simply stood there, as if hearing those words had taken something heavy from his shoulders. When he opened his eyes again, the fear was gone. There was only tenderness. He lifted one hand to her face. Eleanor. Yes, may I? She knew what he was asking. She nodded. Yes. Adrian leaned toward her slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. She didn't. His lips touched hers, softly, carefully, almost uncertainly. It wasn't the kiss of a duke claiming his duchess. It was the kiss of a man who had spent years refusing to need anyone, finally admitting that he did. Eleanor's hand rose to his shoulder. Adrian's arm slipped around her waist. The kiss deepened for only a moment before he pulled away. Their foreheads remained together. Neither spoke. Eleanor smiled. You were right. About what? You don't know how to do this. He laughed quietly. No. She touched his cheek. But you're learning. He looked at her. With you. She smiled. With me. Outside, the rain had begun to fall harder. The chapel windows rattled beneath the storm. Adrian glanced toward the door. His protective instincts returned immediately. But this time, Eleanor didn't feel pushed behind him. She felt beside him. He took her hand. We should leave. She nodded. They walked toward the chapel doors together. Then Eleanor stopped. Adrian turned. What is it? She looked at him. One more thing. What? She reached up and kissed him again. This time, she was the one who chose it. Adrian smiled against her lips. When they finally separated, he whispered, That was unexpected. Eleanor smiled. You married me. He raised an eyebrow. And? You should have expected surprises. He laughed, a real laugh, warm, unrestrained. And for one brief moment, neither of them remembered the danger waiting outside. But someone else had not forgotten. Beyond the chapel walls, hidden beneath the trees, a shadow watched the Duke and Duchess leave together. The watcher held an old photograph. The same photograph Eleanor had found that morning. On its back were 4 words, The girl must remember. The stranger folded the photograph, then whispered into the darkness, Now that they love each other. A pause. We know exactly how to destroy them. 6 months later, Blackwood House no longer felt like a place Eleanor had entered by mistake. It felt like home. The gardens had changed first. The old rose wall had been restored. The eastern cottages had new roofs. The estate accounts were finally being managed honestly, and the servants no longer whispered when Eleanor walked through the halls. They greeted her. They came to her with problems. They asked her opinion. The woman who had once been told to stay out of sight had become the person everyone looked for when something needed to be solved. But Eleanor never became arrogant about it. She simply remembered what it had felt like to be ignored. So she made certain no one under her roof felt invisible. Adrian noticed. He noticed everything about her now. He noticed how she remembered the names of servants' children, how she kept extra blankets for the elderly workers during winter, how she still visited the cottages herself instead of sending someone else. and he especially noticed how she still drank her tea with too much sugar. He had tried to change that. He had failed completely. One spring morning, Adrian entered the breakfast room and found Eleanor sitting beside an open window. She was reading a letter. He walked behind her and kissed the top of her head. "Good morning." She looked up. "You're late. I was working." "You said that yesterday." "I was also working yesterday." She narrowed her eyes. "You are becoming predictable." He smiled. "And you are becoming demanding." "I'm your wife." "Exactly." He sat beside her. Eleanor handed him the letter. It arrived from France. Adrian read it, then looked at her. "Your mother's sister." Eleanor nodded. After months of searching, they had finally discovered the truth. Her mother had not died. She had fled England after discovering that Adrian's father had been involved in a dangerous political conspiracy. She had hidden Eleanor's identity to protect her. She had lived under another name for years. And now, after decades of silence, mother and daughter had finally been reunited. Eleanor had cried when she first saw her, not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because, after all those years, she finally had an answer. She finally knew that she had not been abandoned. She had been protected, and Adrian had stood beside her through every moment. He never tried to take the pain away. He simply stayed. That was what Eleanor remembered most. He stayed, through the anger, through the tears, through the questions that had no easy answers. He stayed. And now her mother was coming to Blackwood House for the summer. Eleanor folded the letter. "She says she'll arrive next week." Adrian smiled. "Then we'll prepare the East Wing." "You don't mind?" "Of course not." She studied him. "You've become very fond of my mother." "I owe her my life." Eleanor smiled. "You owe her your life?" Adrian leaned closer. "No." He touched her hand. "I owe her the chance to meet you." Eleanor's eyes softened. Then she whispered, "Do you remember the first time you saw me?" "Every second." "I looked terrible. You looked frightened." "I was. I know." She smiled. "You still chose me." Adrian lifted her hand. "I would choose you again. Even if you knew everything?" "Especially if I knew everything." That evening, Eleanor walked through the gardens. The sun was disappearing behind the trees. Adrian followed her. She stopped beside the rose wall, the same wall where they had once argued over a dying rose. She looked at it. "It's beautiful now." Adrian stood beside her. "You fixed it." "We fixed it." He looked at her. "I didn't do anything. You stayed." He smiled. "You've mentioned that before, because it matters." She turned toward him. "For most of my life, people left." Her voice softened. "You didn't." Adrian reached for her hand. "I won't." Eleanor smiled. "That's a dangerous promise. I intend to keep it." She leaned against him. For a while, they watched the sunset together. No mystery, no threats, no whispers, just peace. Then Adrian said, "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." She looked up. "What?" "Do you remember the night I first called you my wife?" Eleanor laughed. "How could I forget? You looked terrified." "I was." "Why?" "Because everyone was staring. And now?" She looked around the garden, at the house, at the servants walking in the distance, at the man beside her. "I'm not afraid anymore." Adrian smiled. "Good." He reached into his pocket. Eleanor frowned. "What is that?" He took out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened. "Adrian." He opened it. Inside was a delicate silver ring, not a wedding ring, something else. At its center was a tiny engraving, a rose. And beneath it were 3 words. "You were seen." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "What is this?" "The ring I should have given you the first time." She looked at him. "You didn't need to. I know." He took her hand. "But I wanted to." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Eleanor stared at it. Then at him. "I love you. I love you too." She smiled. "You know what everyone used to call me?" Adrian nodded. "A nobody." "And now?" She looked at him. "The Duchess." He shook his head. "No." He touched her cheek. "My wife." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "And you're equal?" Adrian's expression softened. "Always." She leaned forward. Their lips met beneath the rose-covered wall. The same woman who had once learned to disappear was no longer hiding. She was loved, chosen, heard, and seen. Years later, people would tell the story differently. Some would say the Duke had rescued a poor girl. Others would say Eleanor had been lucky. Some would even claim Adrian had married her out of pity. But those who knew the truth understood something different. Eleanor had never needed rescuing. She had needed someone willing to see what everyone else had overlooked, and Adrian had never needed a perfect duchess. He had needed a woman who could challenge him, laugh at him, stand beside him, and remind him that power meant nothing if a man had no one to share it with. Together, they rebuilt Blackwood House. Together, they raised their children. Together, they turned an estate once filled with secrets into a home filled with laughter. And every spring, when the roses bloomed along the old stone wall, Adrian would take Eleanor's hand and remind her of the night everything began. The night an entire ballroom laughed at a girl they believed was nobody. The night a duke took her hand, the night he called her his wife. And Eleanor would always smile and tell him the same thing. I was never a nobody. Adrian would kiss her forehead. I know. Then he would look at the woman he had once chosen in front of everyone and whisper, "That's why I chose you." The girl who had spent her childhood trying to disappear had finally found the one place where she never had to hide. Not because she became a duchess, not because she gained wealth or a title, but because for the first time in her life she had found someone who saw her completely and loved every part of what he found. And so Eleanor and Adrian lived the rest of their lives, not as the Duke and Duchess who had surprised society, but as two people who had discovered that sometimes the greatest love story begins when the whole world believes someone is worth nothing, and ends with that person becoming someone's everything. The end. Emotional epilogue. Years passed, but Eleanor never forgot the girl she had once been. The girl who stood quietly at the edge of crowded rooms. The girl who wore borrowed dresses and apologized for taking up space. The girl everyone had called a nobody. Sometimes, when Eleanor walked through Blackwood House and heard laughter filling the halls, she would stop for a moment. She would remember, not with sadness anymore, with gratitude, because that girl had survived, and she had become someone stronger than anyone expected. One evening, Eleanor stood beside the old rose wall, with her daughter holding her hand. "Mother," the little girl asked, "is this where Father first fell in love with you?" Eleanor smiled. "Your father would probably say he doesn't remember." A familiar voice came from behind them. "I remember everything." Eleanor turned. Adrian stood beneath the garden arch, older now. A few silver strands had appeared in his hair, but his eyes were exactly the same. He walked toward them. Their daughter ran into his arms. Adrian lifted her easily. Eleanor watched them with a smile. Once, she had wondered whether she belonged in his world. Now she understood. She had never needed to become someone else to belong. She had only needed someone who could see her. Adrian walked back to her. He took her hand. "You disappeared again." Eleanor smiled, only for a moment. "Don't." She looked at him. "Don't what?" "Disappear." His voice was quiet. "I spent too many years looking for you." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I'm right here." Adrian kissed her forehead. "I know." They stood together beneath the roses, the same roses they had once struggled to save, the same garden where two guarded hearts had slowly learned to trust each other. And Eleanor realized that perhaps love was never about being chosen by the most powerful person in the room. It was about finding the one person who made you feel powerful enough to be yourself. She had once been called a nobody, but in Adrian's eyes, she had always been everything. And that was the truth she carried with her for the rest of her life. Sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is the person who deserves to be loved the most. CTA. And now I want to ask you something. If you were Eleanor, would you have trusted Adrian after everything that happened? Or would you have walked away the moment you discovered he had chosen you because of your mother's secret? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if Eleanor and Adrian's story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Subscribe to Whisper's Hearts for more emotional historical romance stories filled with unexpected choices, hidden secrets, powerful dukes, and women who discover that their worth was never determined by what others thought of them. Because sometimes, the greatest love story begins with the person everyone else refuses to see. Until next time, remember, you are never a nobody to the person who truly sees your heart.